Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and once again, I'm joined in Chicago with Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs TV. And Jeff, it's been a while since we got together. We're coming back for the first time in 2026. Hope everyone's had a great holiday season. And it was kind of quiet, but now we need to get back to work because there's a lot of things happening. And as we tape this on January 21, it marks the first year of the second term of Donald Trump. That was yesterday. Today, he is in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, and he is talking about a lot of things. And one of those is Greenland, and he gave a speech early this morning as we taped this. I did not have a chance, Jeff, to pull any of the clips. He spoke for about an hour, and then he took some questions afterwards. So with that, we are going to be talking, ladies and gentlemen, both about that and some of the other big stories, including the fraud going on in Minnesota. But first, Jeff, one of the big stories since we've been gone is this issue about Greenland. We heard about it early in the administration. Now it's boiling to the surface. And the issue is, why do we want Greenland? What is your take as we pick up in 2026 for the first time?
Two words, national security. Didn't change since the last time people looked at it. Large number, 1,500 missiles that China now has that can be coming over the Arctic to the U.S. That's a reason. The whole question is, though, does that require a handover of Greenland by Denmark to the U.S., or could we accomplish with working with our NATO allies to accomplish whatever we need to without taking over? We've got military bases there. We can have more. We could do everything. So what can't we do that Trump wants to do with the status quo? That's the question.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. A lot of people in all this conversation may not have heard of Diego Garcia, which is a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And the United States for a long time has had a naval base there. But the Brits had control of that island, and now they just gave it up. And so now we are not sure what's going to happen with the future of our naval base. That is key because it's one of the reasons President Trump is saying that we need to have control of it. He referenced this in Davos earlier today when he was giving a speech, and he goes, if you just have a lease, you don't have the same rights as if you have control of the island. So he's pushing for control. Now, what he also said, another thing, and I agree with you, what you said, it's about national security. And we're going to play a clip just in a second about that. But a lot of the critics of Trump are saying it's about taking the island away from people that can't defend themselves against Donald Trump, the bully, and we just want to take their rare earth minerals. On one hand, we do, but as Trump said today, rare earth minerals are not that rare, and he's right. What is rare, as he said, is the processing of them. And because we don't want the environmental issues, the processing is all now primarily been going over to places like China, and we have to break that so that, our national security interests, we have control of the rare earth minerals that we need.
Terry, the answer to that, if there comes a time, as there came a time in the last few weeks with Venezuela, where it was necessary to make a move to invade the sovereignty of another nation, he's shown he can and will do it. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it ever did, just do it then. Do it then, Donald. You don't need to do it now. You got the power, you got the ability, use it when you have to.
We're not going to be invading. What we're going to do is pressure people, as any negotiations are, as he's doing right now with the Ukraine war. And there's some indication that the president said today in Davos that negotiations are moving forward. We'll have to see what happens on that, but that could be another big story that comes out perhaps in the next month. But going back to Greenland, I want to play a clip that was taped on January 20th, yesterday, as you and I are taping this, by Michael Pillsbury, who's an expert on national security issues, an expert on China. He is a solid guy to listen to. He was interviewed by Stuart Varney, and he spoke on the issue of why Greenland. Let's take a listen.
The main thing is missile defense, and the Chinese telling everybody for 50 years, they're going to have a very limited, at most 200 warheads, nuclear force. No one should be worried. No one should have missile defense. Now, the Pentagon estimates as many as 1,500 Chinese nuclear warheads, mostly on ICBMs that can reach America over Greenland. Greenland happens to, if you put up a map showing the airspace over Greenland and the missile arcs, the trajectories that missiles would come either from Russia or from China, it goes right over Greenland. So Space Force that President Trump created, they've got to have a much better early warning system based where? Building on the base we've had for decades in Greenland.
So there you go, Jeff. And that's why Pillsbury says it's not really about the rare earth minerals, it's about the strategic importance of Greenland to national security of the United States and to the Europeans.
Well, I don't know why Trump, he probably knew this from Pillsbury or somebody else. There's been a change. There's a greater threat due to the large number of missiles that, nuclear missiles that China has available. And so the threat is much greater in number, perhaps the ability to send them over the Arctic. I don't know why he didn't make that case. I don't understand it. And it made it look like there was no need for this. Why are you doing it? This was an important clip that you showed me, Terry. This guy knows what the hell he's talking about. And I'm sure. So this is his whole thing with Trump. You know, he's got people there. Use them, take the facts, make the case, and then you don't get all this dumb criticism.
And actually, I agree with you, because when he brought up, if you remember, after he was elected in November of 24, before he was even sworn in, he sent his sons to Greenland. And I'm like, what are you doing in Greenland? So, I mean, this goes back to the very beginning of his second term, over a year ago. And yet it just, and you're right, it's just like recently that we heard about that. Now, he did talk, and I forget if it was yesterday or today because he overlaps his comments, but he did talk about what he calls the Golden Dome, and it would be a missile defense system. Right. And yes, now we know that's where he's coming from. And you're right, he should have brought that up a long time ago, because I myself thought, why Greenland? What are we doing with Greenland? But it makes a lot of sense, and he should have brought that up earlier. So that said, you have any further comment on Greenland that you want to bring up?
No, look, just remember, keep his eye on the ball. This is an important foreign policy issue. There also, the other eye has to be on the domestic issue. Everything is about the midterms, which are a year away, but if they lose the House, there it all goes, even if they keep the Senate. The last 2 years are going to be nothing but investigations from the Democrats. All they need is small margin if they got the House. And if worse, if they got the Senate, then you got real trouble. So you ought to be planning now. And, you know, you got to worry about foreign policy, but you got to worry about domestic policy. The two politically should go hand in hand.
Here's the other thing you got to worry about is for voters. And I agree with you. That's what would be happening. But the other point I would make is, where is the Democrats' agenda for improving the economy, for improving national security, for doing all sorts of things? Their primary and maybe their only agenda is Orange Man bad, and how do we fight Trump? So you're right. If the Democrats were to control the House, they would probably try to impeach him again. And the question for voters is, do you want an administration that can continue to address the issues as we have seen in the first year? Or do we want to go back to where we were before, when Nancy Pelosi twice impeached Trump, and where the only thing being accomplished in Washington is political warfare?
Well, again, you just need to focus and articulate on the issues. Wall Street Journal had several important polls that came out this week where they showed Republicans, with all the criticism, with all that's going on in Minneapolis, etc., still the public relies more on Republicans when it comes to the economy, even with all this talk about affordability. Something like 38, 32, I don't know where the other 30% were. The same thing. So on the economy, on immigration, especially illegal immigration, handling the major issues that people rely on from the president and the federal government, Republicans are in the lead. You'd never hear it on the mainstream media, but that's why we're here, right? And these are polls. I didn't do it. These are Wall Street Journal polls. Why is it the mainstream media can't read anything other than polls that seem to be critical of the president? And gosh, there's a lot to criticize this president, but you got to be balanced and you got to give the guy some credit where he's due.
One of the things, and I think this is going to be an issue in the election, is this major story coming out of Minnesota. Now, I'm going to play a clip in a second here, but Chef, you know, the story about Minnesota gained national attention recently when Nick Shirley, a independent investigative journalist, went through some of the daycare centers in Minnesota and uncovered that there were no children at these daycare centers, even though they were getting millions of dollars from the state of Minnesota. And these are federal dollars going to the state for daycare of Minnesota children. Now, that said, Shirley, the other point is, while Shirley uncovered this recently, other investigations, some held by the House of Representatives, the Oversight Committee, which they held last week before you and I were getting back together, uncovered that this was being told in local news sources in Minneapolis as far back as 2012. So this is incredible, and you're going to hear a clip in this video I'm about to play from one of the witnesses that was hearing on January the 7th. But let me play this. This video I'm going to show you, ladies and gentlemen, which runs about a minute long, was a clip produced by the House Judiciary Committee as they met today, January 21. Second hearing in a week or so, or 2 weeks, I should say. But here's what they had to play, and it'll kind of tee up the issue.
It's welfare fraud. It's all about the daycare.
They estimate as much as $100 million a year is being stolen by shady daycare center operators.
So how much money are we talking about stolen from the American taxpayer?
Well in excess of $1 billion.
Ripping off state-run programs intended to feed low-income kids, house the disabled, and provide services to autistic children.
Where are the children at? Do you know where the children are at? Where are the children at in these daycare centers?
I don't care.
Are there children here today?
No.
No children?
Yes.
So this is Quality Leering Center. Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going.
Attorney General Keith Ellison was focused on one thing and one thing only, and that was keeping these folks in business.
When do you think Governor Walz knew about this fraud?
From the very beginning.
What happened here in Minnesota that allowed this fraud to materialize?
The people at the highest levels of responsibility in the government of the state of Minnesota looked the other way.
So just that, again, that was a tape today, and there is an ongoing hearing, and the Illinois Channel will have part of that hearing on this investigation later. But
Terry, not to be too political, but this is all about Minnesota. This is a blue state. This is not a red state. It's a blue city. All this fraud is going on there. And as we'll see as we go through these clips you're showing, this is a cover-up. It's a cover-up by the governor, that Tim Walz.
if you can sit up a little bit by Jeff.
It's a cover-up by the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, cover-up by the governor, Tim Walz. They weren't trying to find out if there was fraud and do their job. They were trying to make sure nobody else found out. The whistleblowers were put to rest, and therefore they could then keep the funds coming to them from these people who were benefiting from the fraud. It's amazing that there doesn't seem to be any discussion of this in the mainstream media.
Well, you're right.
Kids.
And look, here's two things.
Really?
These are allegations. Okay, these are allegations, but we just heard in that small clip a comment by one of the Minnesota House members who said the governor, Tim Walz, has known about this from the beginning. This was going on before he even became governor, and he knew about it. And the allegations made by a number of people or that the Democratic leadership in the state of Minnesota, the governor, the attorney general, and others, purposely looked the other way because they didn't want to offend the Somalis, who were a key voting bloc for them, And they also wanted to, again, an allegation, get the money, the donations from the Somalis. So it was a way of circulating these dollars, these federal dollars, to also help the elected officials.
We know there's something there, because Tim Walz wouldn't have stepped down from his run for re-election because he was still thinking he's going to somehow run for president. But once he got out of it, that's an admission against interest, as we say in the law. We know there's something there because he's worried, because his butt is on the line, okay? And he knows he'll get less attention if he's not running for higher office. And so nobody's focusing on, there are like no brains in the mainstream media. Seriously, folks, don't mean to be so harsh in my criticism, but we're not hearing about
Oh my God, is this a big story or what? This is huge. They're estimating there's over $9 billion that has been stolen going back a number of years, going back at least a decade, but that's huge. And Jeff, I would disagree slightly with you. This is not just about Minnesota, because it begs the question, in every other state, in Illinois, how many dollars are being ripped off? And it seems to me Governor Pritzker ought to be, in light of what has been uncovered in Minnesota, do an investigation and say, are we having any fraud here? Maybe we aren't, but we ought to investigate that.
The rot is in Minnesota. The rot is in Illinois. The rot is in the mainstream media in Illinois. I call out Rick Pearson from the Chicago Tribune. Ted Dabrowski, running for governor in the Republican primary, tries to raise this issue, tries to raise the enormous growth in spending on human services. He doesn't, he says, I don't have evidence at this point of fraud, but since this has come up in a state that's viewed as cleaner in terms of corruption than Illinois, in Minnesota, maybe we should take a look. And what does Rick Pearson do? Where's your evidence of fraud? Where's your evidence? What are you saying? You don't have it? It was ridiculous. This is at a press conference. Pearson, I'm sorry. Either reform and get with it and get some balance, or find something else. I don't care if you're 70.
You and I are playing a little bit of catch up because we took some time off because of the holidays. On January 7th, in the House Oversight Committee, looking into the fraud, and they had 4 members or 3 members, I think it was, of the Minnesota legislature. Jim Jordan was asking the questions and going over what we just said, connecting the dots, or seeking to connect the dots, was on these allegations about who was involved in this fraud and for what purposes. Let's take a listen.
Wasn't just overlooking the fraud. They were actively trying to make sure this program continued, and then they benefited from that politically with contributions to their campaign, all in this same year, all in 2021, when this was all coming to a head. Is that accurate?
That is my understanding.
And this fraud is much bigger than this, because as I look, it's like 6 different federal agencies. Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Small Business Association, Housing, Urban Development, Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture, in this program and a bunch of others. They were shaking down the entire federal government, it looked like. 6 different federal agencies. I think you pointed out, over the last 15 years?
That's correct.
And not only are the Democrat administration overlooking it, they're helping it along. They're assisting it. They're going after whistleblowers, as your colleague pointed out. And they're benefiting from all this politically with contributions to their campaign, not to mention the voting issue that you referenced earlier as well.
So there you go. And Jeff, this is not a story that's going to go away. As I mentioned earlier, there's a House hearing, the Judiciary Committee hearing just today, again, on this fraud. This is going to be a story I think is going to stay with us for the rest of this year. And I predict the amount of government fraud that is being uncovered, the amount of dollars being stolen in the billions, if not hundreds of billions, when you look at potentially around the country. This is going to be an issue, I think, when we go into the November elections, where the Democrats never want to be cutting funding. They always want to raise taxes, and the American voter is going to be going, hang on, how much of this money are you guys just throwing down the toilet?
Where are all the inspector generals on this? And the agencies, Department of Homeland Security before Trump, okay, under Biden, and Health and Human Services, and small business, and labor and agriculture. This was before It's been going on before Trump had this. Where were all those inspectors general that were so important? Oh, Trump is firing him again. Oh, he's covering up. Where the hell are these people? They're supposed to be making sure these agencies are clean. They're supposed to be making sure when there's a whistleblower, they're giving their responsibility. They don't go after him. Why weren't they finding out what Walz was doing to go after the whistleblower? With Keith Ellison, why are they putting him on a pedestal? Where is J.B. Pritzker? Where is he about talking about, well, what have we done here? Where's Kwame Raoul, who filed for like 50 lawsuits against the feds and 0 against his party? You know why? Because he was put in here by money from Democrats. Billions, okay?
Well, and the money is the primary. How much of that money is from Democrat Pritzker? I mean, the governor. You know, if you're a Democrat in Illinois, you don't want to be bucking Daddy Warbucks.
Yeah, why isn't anybody talking about it? The guy spent $400 million to get himself elected and reelected. He sprinkled around another $100 million probably to state reps and state senators to support him. He bought himself. I can say this. And Pritzker, JB, come on here. Give me an opportunity to give you a fair interview, because somebody needs to ask how you got to be governor. Maybe they want to know.
Well, there ought to be an investigation. And I think for sure the House of Representatives, under control of the Republicans, will continue to investigate this. Maybe there'll be more whistleblowers coming out. But on the topic of what's happening, I don't know if there's fraud in Illinois programs. I think we ought to have an investigation. And you bring up a very good point. These auditor generals, that's their job, what they're supposed to be doing. I think what in many cases, going back to Minnesota, I think they were uncovering some of this. There were news articles about it. But Tim Walz, when he came in, just buried his head in the sand and for political reasons purposely turned his head away from it. He does not want to find it. He didn't want to expose it. And neither did the Attorney General, Keith Ellison.
Terry, again, the focus is somewhat on Illinois. It is the Illinois Channel. And so we have an election. We have an important primary going on in the Republican Party as they're basically choosing between the two leading candidates, Ted Dabrowski and Darren Bailey. And who's asking? Darren Bailey, he says, oh, if you say anything negative, you or I say anything negative, oh, you're biased against me. Well, Darren, the question for you is, publicly, you ran before 4 years ago, you lost by 500,000 votes. What's going to be different? Well, we've heard from one of your interviews, softball interviews, words matter. You've learned words matter. Fine. Let's go into that a little bit. That'd be a good interview to have. What'd you learn about words and how are they going to change things? And you brought on a light gov candidate who last time worked with Gary Rabine to get 6%. And now he's going to be the star to squeeze out votes from Cook County for you? Really? I mean, is that bias? I guess so, if you're Darren Bailey and if you're Aaron Del Mar.
Let me see if I can connect some of these issues. We're talking about, are the Democrats doing their job? Now, one of the things, going back to Governor Pritzker, is Illinois, and I should also add that the previous governor, Governor Rauner, was also implicated in this because they made Illinois a sanctuary state. The idea that all the stuff that's going on in Chicago, we've heard about, all the different opposition to ICE, and the administration, the Trump administration has made the point, if you sanctuary cities and sanctuary states when you arrest someone, you arrested them for a reason. You're the ones that arrested these illegal aliens for some crime. If you would hand them over to ICE instead of then releasing them, we wouldn't have to be going around beating the bushes trying to find them after you release them. Now, in light of that going on, and everyone's seen the video of the semi-riots or whatever verb you want to use, recently, while you and I were off the air over the holidays, Attorney General of Illinois, Kwame Raoul, announced he was suing some of the agencies in the federal government because of the way they've been acting. Let's take a listen.
Along with the city of Chicago, I have filed a lawsuit against U.S. Department of Homeland Security and its leadership, U.S. Immigration and Customs and Enforcement and its leadership, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection and its leadership. For decades, federal immigration agents have enforced immigration laws in Illinois without significant interruption to public safety.
So look, he's the Attorney General. That's Kwame Raoul. You and I had him on a show often before when he was a state senator. What's he been? An AG for like 8 years, 50 lawsuits against the feds. Hey, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, maybe it's time you looked at some of your agencies here in Illinois. I mean, under Governor Pritzker in the last 7 years, spending in Illinois has gone up 40%. To a recent high of $55 billion, more than $55 billion. Kwame Raoul, are you confident there's no fraud going on? Why humans, look, nobody's saying we should not have any spending on human services, but what's the percentage increase? Is that an indication you should be investigating to make sure there's no fraud going on? And is it something you should be working with your governor on? He's certainly given you a lot of support to get you to be AG. Can you do it fairly? But more importantly,
and Jeff, if not him, here's the other thing. Where's the legislature? The legislature is a separate branch of government. They don't have to do what the governor's doing. They don't have to wait for the governor. The House Speaker, Chris Waltz, House Speaker of Illinois House, could launch an investigation and call witnesses and put them under oath. The Attorney General could or could not be part of that. The governor, if he wants, doesn't have to use Attorney General Raoul, and nothing against the Attorney General. I like him. He's a nice guy. But the governor could appoint a special investigator,
well, here's
selected
why
maybe as a former federal prosecutor.
Here's Terry. This is why it won't be done in Minnesota. It won't be done in Illinois, because somebody would ask if they want to be fair. It's fine to have protest. That is constitutionally guaranteed. But what is not constitutionally guaranteed is actions taken by so-called protesters that are aimed at impeding and obstructing law enforcement officers from the federal government. Take one example. Is it protesting to follow people around who are trying to apprehend criminal illegal immigrants? And they got names, they're looking for people, they're trying to do it within the law, and people are told, follow them around. A federal court judge, I believe, has said, this is an interesting decision, you can do that. You can follow them around, just keep at a safe distance, okay? So were they at a safe distance with Renee Good? When was the car being turned and going toward the person? Is that person who is coming toward, is he supposed to make a split second and wait until it either
and Jeff, here's the other thing. Speaking of Renee Good,
let me just finish this.
Go ahead.
Let me finish. The point is, nobody is raising this as a clear issue in Illinois, in Minnesota. Let's get it right, folks. I don't think the law in Illinois, whether sanctuary state or not, allows protesters to be impeding and obstructing justice. And that
absolutely, and that's what I was going to say. Whether in Illinois, Minnesota, or elsewhere, when these law enforcement officers, if they're, in this case, they're federal law enforcement officers, the ICE, you cannot be interrupting them in the course of their duties unless you too want to be arrested, because that by itself is a crime. When Miss Good, who tragically was killed, but she was being ordered to get out of her car because she had her car sideways in the street, blocking the police, and thereby she was guilty. Was that a crime that was deserved the death penalty? No, that's not why she was shot. But she could have gotten out of her car. She was being ordered. We should not have our public officials encouraging these people. We got about 40 seconds, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, she was being asked by her wife. She was being screamed at, accelerate, go ahead. So not only don't get out of your car, go toward the officer there, okay?
All right, we got to wrap, but folks, we hope you, comment. I'm sure we give you plenty of reasons to make comments pro or against what we said. But Jeff, until next time, we'll keep our fingers on the news. And folks, next time, we hope you continue to watch and comment. Thanks so much.